Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Camila Koz, and I will be the moderator for today's discussion about women and reintegration. This event is part of the Migration Week, organized by the UN Migration Work Network, and it comes under a research partnership between the Migration Policy Institute and the German Development Cooperation Agency, GIZ, supported by the German Federal Ministry for Economy, Cooperation and Development, BMZ. I'd start with a housekeeping note. If you have any technical problem, please email events@migrationpolicy.org or call the number on the screen. The webinar will last an hour. We will have a Q&A at the end of the call, so please type any question in the Q&A box or email them to events@migrationpolicy.org. And I would like to start by acknowledging that 3 weeks ago, MPI and MPI Europe funding president, Dimitri Papadimitriou, passed away. Dimitri will forever shape how we approach policy questions in the migration field. And beyond being an exceptional individual and a great mentor for many of us at the Institute, he left a lasting mark on all of our work, including with our guests today. MPI is planning a formal tribute that will be announced shortly. And to our topic today. In May of this year, the International Migration Review Forum will be the opportunity to take stock of what has changed since the adoption of the Global Compact for safe, orderly, and regular migration in 2018. The agreement on a common objective on return and reintegration was a main achievement at the time of the negotiation, and the compact encouraged for more cooperation between countries of origin and countries of destination in this area. Of course, a lot of work remains to be done to make return more human, to make reintegration more sustainable, and to get central and local governments in countries of origin more involved in reintegration activities. In today's session, with representatives from government, international organizations, civil society actors, we turn to one specific aspect, women and reintegration. And we have with us 4 extremely knowledgeable panelists of this topic. First, Dr. Elke Lobo, who is the head of Directorate on Displacement, Migration Crisis, Prevention and Management, and Commissioner for Refugee Policy at BMZ. Abibatu Vanefol, who is the Chief of Mission for the International Organization for Migration in Ghana, Togo, and Benin. Sijal Aziz, who is the Director for Return and Reintegration at the organization WELDO, based in Pakistan. And finally, Mariana Mesci, the Executive Director of Different and Equal in Albania. And together, we'll jump in a discussion on how donors, implementing partners, government, civil society actors can make return and reintegration work better for women. And I'd like to raise 3 questions before turning to our first panelist. The first one is, do women and men have different expectations when it comes to return and reintegration, and how do they depend on the context, the country they're returning to? What are the specific challenges faced by women when they return to their country? And here we're talking about women returning with their family, with their husband, with their wife, as well as women who traveled alone, sometimes against the will of their relative, to meet their lover abroad, to find employment, also more freedoms and more opportunities. And while there are many initiatives already ongoing, and we'll discuss them today, what else can we do to address this issue and learn from different parts of the world? And now let me turn to Dr. Lobo, who will share some thoughts about what has changed since the adoption of the Global Compact on Migration and how BMZ and its partner have sought to be more proactive in addressing all of these issues.
Thank you very much, Camille. And thank you very much, the panelists. I already stated it's great to have you all here on the panel, because I'm very happy to have people from all over the world on the panel. But before I start a short input, I would like to express my deep sadness about the loss of my dear friend Dimitri, who always engaged told me that I should come in with development perspective into the migration issue. So I will really miss him. And our task now is to bring the local perspective, our perspectives into the discussions on the multilateral level and international level. So I'm very sad about this. But starting with my short input, I would like to thank the MPI for organizing this timely webinar in the run-up to the International Migration Review Forum in May. I would like also to express special thanks to the United Nations Network for Migration. I really started to discuss with Jonathan Prentice and Louise Arbour when all this was established in Marrakesh and when we started with the GCM. It's a good opportunity to showcase good practices in the implementation of the Global Compact for Migration, the GCM. And with reference to our topic today, gender responsiveness and a gender transformative approach are crucial elements of German development cooperation. I don't know whether you already heard that our new minister, Svenja Schulze, called for a feminist development policy for all genders. You can imagine that this is very good for us because we now have really to put this into praxis with new ways of working, and that there is some work to do. I have been working in development cooperation for a long time. I work with an NGO, I work with a women's NGO in Latin America. So I come from the grassroots perspective, and my experience is we have to connect to reality of on the ground to shape policy and to really get a change in migration policy and in return and reintegration policy. So the successful implementation of the GCM in all its dimension requires cooperation and partnership first, from my point of view. The BMZ works closely with all relevant actors in our partner countries. We are convinced that sustainable solutions must be based on local structures, processes, and actors, and very important, evidence, lessons learned. And we are convinced bridging the gap by integrating our findings at the ground into the multilateral system and into the GCM is the way to go. And I'm planning to do that in all the meetings we're going to have. The GCM calls for facilitating safe and dignified return and reintegration, as Camille mentioned it right now. And we pledge for a gender-responsive, development-oriented approach towards sustainable reintegration. Successful and sustainable return and reintegration can be a driver for economic and social development. But very important, it's not only social and economic integration. If measures integrate aspects like mental health and psychosocial care, empowerment of women, they contribute to social cohesion and peace in the countries of origin. Therefore, an integrated support to migrants and structural support to our partner countries are key pillars of our development work. German Development Cooperation established advisory centers for jobs, migration, and reintegration in 12 partner countries. These centers offer advice and support to returnees. The centers also advise, and this is very important to us, people who are interested in regular migration. In accordance with Do No Harm, these offers are also available for the local population. This includes vocational training, startup coaching, job placements, and psychosocial support, as I mentioned. It's our 360-degree approach, we call it. All these measures are implemented in close cooperation with our partners, be it the local structures, the government, the NGOs like Solvodi, Solidarity with Women in Distress in Kenya, the IOM structure in Iraq. So we really work with and in the countries of origin. Gender responsive measures range from pre-return workshops with a gender-responsive design to targeted career guidance for female returnees in Kosovo, for example, and the provision of psychosocial support for female returnees in Iraq, who suffered a lot during the conflict. Women and girls in all their diversity have specific return and reintegration needs. To ignore a gender perspective on voluntary return and sustainable reintegration would mean to disregard a crucial factor of returnees' experiences. For example, women and girls are still predominantly victims of human trafficking and gender-based and sexualized violence. But it's a broader field. It's because of religion, it's because of ethnical points. Nevertheless, I want to stress, it's women in return and reintegration are not only victims, they are also agents of change in their societies where they reintegrate again. So the bigger picture to come to an end of our approach is, if almost half of all migrants worldwide are women, gender has to play a crucial role in migration decisions, especially in the development context. To address the needs of all genders in all projects, we have to compile gender analysis and have introduced quality standards in all our projects. In Niger, for example, we fund a gender-responsive migration project where we cooperate with UN Women, and we work with the government of Niger to bring gender equality into migration policy. There's still a lot to do. The IMRF is a great opportunity to reflect on progress as well as on challenges. We need more projects with a clear focus on gender equality, especially in the area of voluntary return and sustainable reintegration, but not only, it's in the whole migration field. A recent IOM study underlines the need for more gender transformative perspectives and actions. It is against this backdrop that we choose gender responsiveness as one of our key priorities areas for the IMRF. Just to mention, we built up a network of displaced women with worldwide representatives of NGOs, women who have migration experience. For the first time, they themselves make their voices loud as agents of change for policy change. Together with our partners, for example, with the network, Women as Agents of Change, we stand ready to promote women and girls in all their diversity as agents of change in the migration context. I look forward to your discussions. I wish us all a successful event, and to all of you a lot of power to make the change possible. Women are agents of change in the migration area more than in any others. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lovell, for outlining all the different aspects of women and reintegrations, the challenge women face, but also the opportunity that reintegration bring, as well your expectation, your objective with the IMRF. Very interesting to hear from the perspective of a European country that has been so active in linking up reintegration and development. And now I'll turn to Ms. Wanifol, who's the Chief of Mission for IOM in Ghana, Togo, and Benin, 3 countries of origin, transit, and destination in West Africa. And I'd like to ask you specifically about Ghana, a country that receive returning from Europe, but also North Africa, Niger, and the Gulf. Ms. Vane, can you tell us about the main challenge faced by female returnees in Ghana, but also maybe, as Dr. Lebeau alluded to, the positive aspect that can be associated with their return, and how does their situation differ depending on where they're coming back from?
Thank you. First of all, allow me indeed to thank MPI for organizing this event and associating IOM to this discussion. I'm very pleased to be part of this panel. To respond to your question, I would like first to start by emphasizing the percentage of female returning that still remain low. In general, for instance, in Ghana, female assisted through IOM assisted voluntary return programs represent about 8% out of the total returns. And they came mainly, as you mentioned, from Libya and Niger. We do have some returning from Europe, and then they represent about 15 to 25%. In contrast, female returning from Middle East and Gulf countries account for about 90%, 99% are about the total returnees. And nearly almost of them are victims of trafficking and or subjected to some some form of exploitation. With regard to the challenges that we have noticed, first of all, we have the first one at social level. At social level, meaning that the community perception of single female that returns is that they have been subject to some form of exploitation, and the anecdotal evidence suggests that they have more difficulties to socially integrate. This is especially true for those returning from the Gulf countries, for instance, and then IOM works with community influencers and key leaders to sensitize about these issues. The other challenge that we have noticed also is regarding to the, let's say, the challenge they face to find the right school, for instance, in reintegrating their children into their community because of language barriers. This is one, and we have also another one related that on psychosocial challenges that they needs and that they need. Some women, they return pregnant, for instance, without poor or non-natal care in their host countries. So, and they need medical care and psychosocial support. At the economic level, so female returnees sometimes face discrimination in the employment sectors. So what we do is to encourage them to mitigate this discrimination, for them to, for instance, undertake technical and vocational educational training in sectors that are mainly reserved for men. For instance, such as heavy-duty machine operations. These are one of the examples that I can do. The other challenge is the non-inclusion in decision-making process. For instance, those returning with their husband, usually they tend to be left aside when it's come to decide on the integration, economic integration and business to be set up. That what we do is indeed to ensure that they also be that part of the participation and the process, during all the process, for them to give also their perspective in terms of activities that they can put in self. But also, I think on the positive aspect, I would say that we have also, we have women, we don't need to forget that we have women who are returning. When they return, they have also experience that they have gained abroad, and they also came with some funds they have accumulated over the wood. And this is also, I don't know if I can tell it as a challenge, but they put also in a challenge some traditional role and dependency on their husband, because they become more autonomous, more independent, because they come with all this experience and some funds that they have. So, and then they can also, their migration can be a positive social transformation, but on the other end, but also cause of gender-related conflict. So this is what I can say for now.
Thank you very much for outlining all this different aspect. It was very rich. And you've already mentioned some of the action deployed by IOM. And I was wondering whether you could tell us maybe a bit more also the role played by the Ghanaian government to respond to these specific difficulties, and maybe to what extent this activity have been connected to Ghana plan to implement the Global Compact.
Thank you. So as I mentioned, I think counseling is very on mental health and psychosocial support is key. And for that, we are working closely with the government of Ghana, indeed to make sure that these migrants, when they come, they receive also the psychosocial support. And through that, of course, we need to ensure that the actors, governmental actors, and not only governmental actors, but also the civil society, they have the capacity to provide these services to migrants that are returning. This is one of the actions that are put in place with IOM support. And also, with regard to shelters, with regard to shelters, we have also worked with the government, advocated towards the government for the establishment of suitable services that also include returnees and make available services. For instance, in particular, the government recognizing the particular vulnerability of women returning without family. So the government of Ghana has also put in place a shelter that provides temporary accommodation and other direct services, such as psychosocial support, as I mentioned. And also with regard to those victims of trafficking, also the government, the Ghana Immigration Police has also put in place services to provide trauma-informed care to address mental and health of returnees and right-based approach when dealing with these cases. So these are also, and also for those who are returning with their children, for instance, we have also been able to provide, to work with the government for them to provide access to education for these children. At the policy level, I think the government also have also, after the adoption of the Global Compact of Migration, has also put in place, adopted a national labor migration policy that also look at, let's say, putting a framework for an ethical and orderly migration, and also with a gender-sensitive approach with regard to protection and right of migrants. The government also have been able, with the support of IOM, to put in place a standard operating procedures for the return and reintegration of migrant returning, of Ghanaian returning from abroad. This to allow to have a common understanding on the integration, which is indeed a global approach that is needed, and to make that all the stakeholders and actors that are involved in this sector has a common understanding on the process with regard to reintegration.
Thank you very much. And maybe just in 1 minute, because I want to keep time for all of their speaker and Q&A, but can you tell us in 1 minute, you know, despite all of these activities and this policy, we previously discussed that there's still some pressing gap when it comes to the reintegration for female returnees. So if you can maybe just tell us 1 or 2 words on what these are.
So for the most pressing gap, I think I would say, of course, resources. I think there is still a need to mobilize more resources, either through partners, because the government is supported through partners like IOM and other actors intervening in the field of migration. But also, I think for government to be able to mobilize internal resources, for instance, through budgetary allocation in certain ministries that have in charge the reintegration or taking in charge the victim of trafficking. This is one of the maybe key actors. And also, I think in terms of capacity building, the government needs maybe to have more support in terms of mainstreaming all the migration activities, action, or reintegration process, protection needs, and access to services is another, opening up the access to services for those who are coming back at local level.
Thank you very much. So after this rich deep dive into return and reintegration in Ghana, I will now turn to Ms. Aziz, who is responsible for reintegration program at the civil society organization Weldo in Pakistan. Ms. Aziz, you're based in a country that's quite far from Ghana, and yet we can assume that some of the challenges that are faced by female returnee are similar. Can you tell us about what these difficulties are and how they depend on the situation of women upon their return, whether they return, you know, on their own or with their family?
Thank you, Camille. As you said before, the challenges are almost the same. In fact, we say all face the same challenges throughout the world. But since Pakistan is a heavily patriarchal society, therefore the women face a number of economic, social, and psychosocial challenges here. And since women returnees are a marginalized group, therefore their challenges are magnified. Most of the women that we have worked with, Weldu has worked with over 11,000 returnees who have come back to Pakistan on voluntary and non-voluntary basis. So most of the women that we have worked with either had gone abroad in the first place as wives, or with the wish to marry somebody of their own choice in Europe against their family's wishes. Some of the women who have returned after they got divorced, after marrying the person of their own choice. So once they come back to Pakistan, they have to face the persecution from their families who don't welcome them as they welcome male returnees. So immediately upon return, women are faced with the need for adequate accommodation. And accommodation facilities in Pakistan for women are not adequate. In fact, they're very few and very far in between. And it's not safe as well for women to get benefit of those accommodation facilities as well. After the women come back under several programs that Weldu is carrying out for returns and integration, they are faced with the accommodation challenges. Secondly, the businesses in Pakistan are genderized, I would say. There are some businesses that have been tagged as women appropriate businesses, and there are other businesses that are in the domain of men. So the women appropriate businesses are garment stores or boutiques, I would say, beauty salons. And if women want to do a job, the most respectable job for women is considered to be teaching. This narrows the choices for women to do business here in Pakistan. And also it creates more competition among women who are running those businesses. So women are more in competition with each other than their male counterparts. And also the genderized business face a bias when it comes to buying inventory or getting a commission as well, because the commission on goods that is available for males is double the commission of goods that is available for female. So a woman cannot hope to make a good profit to run a business smoothly as compared to the male returnees who are coming back to Pakistan. Another very, very dire issue is traveling. Traveling is very difficult for women here in Pakistan because the traveling options are not great. We don't have a good public transportation system here in Pakistan. For some of the public transportation that has been set up, women face harassment issues on those travel options all the time. In Pakistan, you would be much safer traveling with a 5-year-old male child than traveling alone. So you put all these things together and you see that women have faced more challenges than men when it comes to setting up a business. They have a particularly limited reintegration assistance amount. They have to think about the accommodation requirement. They have to think about setting up a business for themselves. They have to think about getting lesser profits. So all in all, their integration for women is very difficult here in Pakistan as compared to our male returnees. The women who are single mothers also face the dilemma of reintegration assistance for their children's education, accommodation and business startup and health issues, because they cannot run their businesses while their children stay at home. They have to put them in nanny care, or they have to put them in nurseries or schools. And then they have to think about investing reintegration assistance in their kids' education as well. So these are just some of the issues. I think I'm running out of time, so.
Yeah, I just want to follow up. Thank you very much for this. And I think very important point on the challenge women face to open and manage a business, and how these challenges are more important than the one that male returnee face. Could you give us a few examples of at Weldu what type of activity you've deployed to address these specific challenges?
Well, we do provide under our various programs, we do provide accommodation assistance, business startup assistance, and assisting women in admitting their children in schools. But we can do so much as to what is available here in Pakistan and what is available in the programs. We do go out of our way to help assist women in reintegrating them back into the society. For example, one of our attorney, she married a man of her choice and against her family wishes, and then went to UK. After a while, she got divorced because she was in an abusive relationship, and then she came back to Pakistan. Now, upon return, her family wanted to kill her, so she did not want to go back to her city of return. So she stayed here in Rawalpindi, and we had to provide accommodation to her. And then, fortunately, at that time, Valdu was running a project that provided on-job training, that provided TVET education for women and men here, returnees here in Pakistan. So she was inducted in one of our TVET training programs, and she was able to get a job in a city where Valdu assisted her with. But still, the problem of accommodation was there. Where would she stay in that city? So we had to get in touch with the returnees who had already come there, women returnees who have already come there, and then find her an accommodation that she could share with another female returnee who has come back. So we do try to assist women as much as possible, but we can do so much as we are allowed under the conditions in Pakistan and under the projects. And I would say the women returnees, they require much more attention and much more integration, much more choices when it comes to reintegration assistance here in Pakistan, as well as in other countries across the world.
Thank you very much, Ms. Aziz. Very, very interesting to hear your perspective from civil society actor and all the effort you deploy to deliver assistance to women in a context where they already face difficulty to access livelihoods and their rights. And now as our last speaker, we'll head to Europe, and discuss the situation of a group that is even more vulnerable, victims of trafficking. So Ms. Meshi is the executive director of Different But Equal in Albania. And among many things, her organization assists survivors of trafficking upon their return. Ms. Meshi, you've heard from our other speakers all the difficulty faced by women returnees in Pakistan and Ghana and other contexts. But you've also heard Ms. Manipol talk about victims of trafficking in Ghana and how they also face additional challenges. Can you describe what are the situation you're facing in Albania to begin with, maybe?
Thank you very much, Camille. And as my colleagues mentioned, challenges faced by returnees, but especially by victims of trafficking upon their return are myriad. Some are situated in the individual experiences and situations. Others are informed by the broader socioeconomic context. So some of these challenges include security problems that come as a result of threats of traffickers or their family members, and also due to the fact that for those victims of trafficking that collaborated with justice institutions, the penal proceedings goes long, and very often the traffickers are not punished. And as far as traffickers are not punished, security is a concern for victims of trafficking and even for the people that try to support them. Stigma and victim blaming is another challenge, and I heard even from my colleague from Pakistan that victims of trafficking face when they return, including the rejection in many cases by their families and also by the community. And this is one of the biggest challenges faced, especially by the sexual and gender minorities. Most of them face stigma in the community where they have lived before being trafficked. And as I mentioned, even rejection, discrimination. So they decide to be reintegrated in another environment, which caused, of course, challenges in starting the new life in a new environment. Mental and physical health problems are another challenge, which come as a consequence of many abuses that the victims of trafficking has suffered during the trafficking experience. Traumas that victims of trafficking have passed have long-term effects in their lives, and it needs a lot of support, and in long term, especially for their recuperation. Limited employment opportunities are very often cause difficulties, especially in finding a suitable job and a sustainable job. And this is especially a big challenge for victims of trafficking whom are alone mothers and do not have family support for their children, and very few jobs can suit to their situation. And moreover, as my colleague from Pakistan mentioned, to open a business or to run it that without a support. And as there are many gaps in our social provision system, it's even difficult for them to find alternative care for their children while they work. Finding long-term solution for housing is also another challenge for the returned victims of trafficking. As we in Albania, there are developed to a certain level the social housing program, but not all the municipalities has developed those programs. And in those that are developed are more short-term solutions and short-term programs, but not long-term solutions. I might stop here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Meshi. I just wanted to follow up on all of this challenge that you've outlined. If you could share a few examples of concrete activities that your organization is doing on the ground.
Yeah. Our organization, it's an organization that works 24 hours, 7 days a week to provide the services for victims of trafficking. And we provide a full package of reintegration assistance through a 3 phases program, where the first stage is initial crisis intervention, the second that can go up to 6 months. The second stage is support for stabilization and transition toward independent life, and the last stage is social inclusion and reintegration support. We have a multidisciplinary team composed of social workers, psychologists, doctor, and lawyer that all together works to address different needs that the victims of trafficking have. The provision of safe and affordable accommodation and care option, like for example, shelter, which function 24 hours for those cases that needs, rented apartments for those that are transiting towards independent life, or foster families for minors, alternative placement for victims of trafficking that might have serious mental health problems. Medical assistance and care in the short and in long term, including specialized medical treatment, also due to the consequences of problems that they have due to consequences of trafficking. Psychological support and counseling is an important intervention and support in our work in short and in long term. For example, we provide individual and group counseling, art, music, or dance therapy, family counseling and support also. And education, including formal and non-formal education opportunities, is another example, including schooling, school reinsertion support, vocational training, professional training, life skills training and tutoring, and counseling and orientation for professional trainings. And we dedicate a lot of work in economic empowerment opportunities and development, which can include job placement or internship, where we cooperate a lot with private sector in this aspect, other income generation activities, also business development and support for running, and counseling and coaching for employment. Legal assistance and support to victims of trafficking is very important, and we provide this through our lawyers, especially when they are included in criminal justice or even in civil and labor proceedings. Legal assistance assistance and support is very often associated with their trafficking experiences. And yeah, I will conclude with specific support that we give even to the children of the victims of trafficking, where we address different of their needs, but especially we have developed some alternative care, PM and after school care, in order for them to have a safe environment while their mothers are working. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you to all the panelists for sharing all this very rich insight. I think we're seeing, like, despite, you're representing very different contexts, we're seeing the similar needs in terms of access to shelter, the need for mental health support, sometimes the difficulty of not being able to rely on family networks anymore. And finally, all the challenges associated with gaining, finding livelihoods to start their life again in the countries of origin. Before we open to question, and actually I'll integrate one of the questions we received in this, I'd like to turn to our three last panelists with just a question as to your objective, your expectation with the IMRF. Dr. Lebel already mentioned what her plan was, and I was wondering from your perspective if you had anything else to add as to what you would like to see in May, be part of the discussion between all the different signatories of the Global Compact. Maybe Ms. Vanifol, I'll start with you, and then I'll hand over to Ms. Aziz, and then back to Ms. Meji.
Okay, thank you again. Maybe I would start by a very firm commitment for all the member states to mobilize more resources for the implementation of the GCM at country level, especially in terms of reintegration, providing more financial and technical support to returnees. And the other expectation relates, for me, I hope that we will have a more strong commitment from the government that will involve also the participation of decentralized services, for instance, to facilitate access to relevant basic services such as the health, childcare, housing, shelter, food, etc., through the strengthening of referral system. With here, I mean the commitment for the enhancing capacities of local authorities and community leaders, including civil society, to include women's needs in the reintegration process for a more equal participation in a country level. So the last one relates to the need for a more long-term, maybe ambitious, the need to ensure that women could participate in strategic solutions and policy development platform. For instance, in women's integration process, it is important to eliminate all the barriers and vulnerabilities that women were facing before departure, to avoid recidivism with an exposure to all the risk linked to irregular migration. This will happen only if we ensure a smooth reintegration process through effective measures to empower women. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Aziz, if you want to follow up on that.
Yes, based on our experience, what I would suggest, I mean, it may be too ambitious, but I think it is the need of the hour. So I would suggest a tailor-made program for women returnees rather than a program that is there for the male and the female returnees, because the needs and requirements of the female returnees are different than the male returnees. So the reintegration assistance that they get is the same. So it's a one solution fit all sort of situation that we are in. And the needs of women returnees are accommodation, then job placement, then the assistance for children's education, then health assistance, then on top of everything else, more integration assistance amount when it comes to setting up a business, because they usually require a helper if they have to run a business here in Pakistan, and that is not possible in the reintegration amount that they are getting here in Pakistan from several countries. So what I would like to see is there's a checklist which the women returnees can check each and every section of what sort of assistance they require. And then their integration assistance is tailored around that checklist. And it's not, you go to the market, you buy a Coca-Cola bottle. It's like you go to the market and you have your own beverage that gets mixed up. So women have different needs, women returnees specifically, they have different requirements, and they have different issues, different social issues, different economic and psychosocial issues. So when it comes to reintegrating women back into a society or in their country of origin, they should be provided different reintegration support than what is currently available.
Thank you. And now handing over to Ms. Mishi.
Thank you very much. I would like to bring two recommendations that, for me, increasing efforts and resources for ensuring safe and dignified return and reintegration of victims of trafficking by taking into consideration especially the principles of do not harm, voluntariness, tailor-made by ensuring data protection, risk assessment, and needs assessment, and social inclusion programs in countries of origin. In order to avoid any victimizing situation, but especially to ensure the successful reintegration, social inclusion programs should be available to all trafficked persons who wish to go back to their place of origin or even need to be resettled in a third country. These programs should aim for long-term empowerment and social inclusion of trafficked person. And in this framework, I would like to go broader with my recommendation, like it is a need to establish transnational referral mechanisms where they are missing between countries of origin and destination, and to be reinforced those that are already existing. I would like to give another recommendation on the improvement of the legal and institutional framework for the protection of victims of trafficking. I have seen that many countries, included Albania, do not have an anti-trafficking law or a modern slavery law. So a comprehensive anti-trafficking law with specific focus on protection of victims of trafficking is important to our perspective for an effective anti-trafficking legal framework in each country, and as a result in ensuring effective protection and assistance for successful reintegration of victims of trafficking. Thank you.
Thank you so much to the three of you for sharing your objective ahead of the IMRF. I think it's very helpful to make it more concrete. I'll now open to Q&A, to question from the audience. So please don't hesitate to mark your question in the chat box or to email them at even@migrationpolicy.org. And I have a first question from our audience for Dr. Lovell. Because you mentioned the centers that are managed by Germany to help, in different countries to help reintegrate returnees. And we had a question on how you ensure that the assistance was gender sensitive, but also how do you do the outreach to female returnees who, for different reasons, may not be so keen on visiting the center or, claiming some of the assistance that they're entitled to.
Yes, thank you so much. I think the strength of our migration hubs or centers is that it's connected to our development policy in the country the migration center is located. So we connect people who come to programs and to projects. Let's say, for example, I understood very well from the Ghana example, for example, but also the other two panelists mentioned that it's often very difficult for the women to find a job because of cultural situation of husband and so on. I don't want to repeat. So what we try is to connect our development programs in the country with the migration center. So a woman comes and says, this is my problem, and they try to elaborate with her a business plan, for example. reflecting on the situation, the framework. And they also, on the other hand side, reach out to the programs and projects, to the communities we work in, because when we work with, for example, with refugees, we also always work with the communities they live in. So we work with the community and try to bring people to the center. So this is to the question. So the Migration Center is a 360-degree again. We try to bring all the issues together. And there is one thing I was thinking the whole time when I was listening to the very interesting inputs of the other panelists. I think we have to open up the whole return and reintegration story. We have to look at the root causes. Why does all this happen? Mariana mentioned the legal framework and so on. I think it's very important to have a more coherent all over look at the return and reintegration, because I haven't heard the word legal migration. Why not offer a woman that is in a problematic situation in a country and she wants to go back to the country of origin? I feel there are different solutions. She may stay in the country if there is an opportunity for the integration in the country, if they have legal migration laws. She may go back to her country of origin and there find her new way of living. So I just wanted to mention this. When I listen to all of you, I think we have to see it from different perspectives, the 360-degree, and try to connect more to the other side, which means, for example, the reintegration programs have to connect with the IOM legal migration issues, and we try to work this, for example, with IOM for the last years. We have a very close cooperation with them, and we have to bring this into the GCM, not only look at one part of the story. Thank you for allowing me to line out this a little bit.
Thank you very much, Dr. Labol. And I now have two questions for Ms. Aziz. The first one is, in the case of women returning from society with, different social or cultural norms, you mentioned the situation in Pakistan for women. Is that a problem, and have you managed this situation in the past, or what type of activity do you think could help manage this situation? And a second question on the linkages between, the information that's being shared by return consular, let's say in Europe, and the reintegration partner like you in Pakistan. Do you feel women, especially vulnerable women, receive sufficient information as to what's waiting for them back in Pakistan? Or do you think there's a need to better prepare them to share better quality information?
Well, the women, as I mentioned earlier, are being provided assistance when it comes to accommodation, business startup, assistance towards getting their children admitted to schools. But this reintegration, this has to be done within a certain reintegration amount that they are entitled to. So the need of the women is much more than that reintegration amount. So they may need legal assistance, they may need health assistance, they may need accommodation, they may need business startup support. So that amount becomes too less when you proportionate it equally into all those requirements and needs. So Well-Do has been working with a number of women in Pakistan. We have supported them reintegrate into Pakistani society. But I wouldn't say this initiative has been 100% success, because the needs of women far outruns the assistance that is there for the women. And as for the second question, can you repeat that again, please?
The second question was on the information that's provided to female returnee prior to their return. And here I'm thinking about the European context where they're in touch with return consular, and especially for vulnerable women.
Women here, most of the women that we have received were not very well educated. The information that they require, they received while they were in Europe was communicated to them in English language. So there was this barrier. And in the case of Pakistan, what we see mostly, as we have done thorough research on why there's a communication gap and information gap of what is said and what the women understand, is most of the interpreters that are being used by the European counselors are not very well versed in our local languages here in Pakistan. So you have one national language, and then you have hundreds of local dialects that women understand better than they would understand Urdu language. Furthermore, the interpreters being used are mostly from India. So they fail to get the point across to women returnees about the information that is available upon their return, the information that is relevant to the program, the information that is relevant to the reintegration assistance options. So once a woman comes back to Pakistan, it's well due carrying out all the background information dissemination for the woman. So it's like this: a woman has decided to come back to Pakistan, and then she receives the information rather than receiving that information prior to her return. To cater to that, we have offered free services to women and men returnees who want to come back to Pakistan but haven't decided yet because of lack of information, that they can speak to us on Skype every day for 2 hours. And that facility is being used by several returnees who decide to come back to Pakistan. And since Veldu has provided reintegration assistance to to returnees in each and every area of Pakistan, therefore we have the required information. For example, if a returnee wants to know whether we want to set up a business in a certain area in Pakistan, and that business is a tire business, so we have the information: how many businesses are tire businesses, what is the economic situation of the area that the returnee is coming back to, what are the reintegration options available for the returnees, which businesses will work in that particular area, which businesses won't, what are the travel options for that particular area. So when it comes to women or men, there is a lack of communication. There's a gap in communication of what is being said and what is being understood and received, I would say.
Thank you very much. We just have time for 2 last questions. So I'll first turn to Ms. Vanifol about the engagement of the government of Ghana to this gender approach. You mentioned that was something that they've integrated in the past few years in relationship to migration. From your experience, in practice, how could organization, donor, development agency push for even more be done on the ground in terms of integrating these different gender approaches and catering specifically for the needs of female returnees?
Okay, so for me, I think the most important thing, first step is indeed to make sure that the existing framework in terms of policy integrate has the gender sensitive approach. This is at a global level. And then also now in a more concrete step, when we work through the mainstreaming into programs, and then once we tailor programs, when women are received, if female are received at country level, is to make sure that the services that are here to support them have the capacity first to understand their needs, how to identify, to do the correct screening of this female that maybe they may pass through several their situation, to understand their psychosocial needs, and then also focus on their well-being. I think this is the most thing before we go to the step of reintegration, economic empowerment, or economic reintegration. First of all, I think it is important first to be able to screen what are these needs, what are behind these sufferance, how we can support from first through counseling, psychosocial support, and then now after that to go. I think it is an integrated approach, and then it is necessary that we work also with the local services. As we are here, we are supporting them, but it is important that the services has this capacity to integrate, to give access to these women, and those who are these actors at the front line can be also able to support these women women to identify their needs first of all. And then that's also, I think there is a work that needs to be done at community level, of course. As I said, the communities have the first to stigmatize these women who are coming back. So how can we also make sure that these communities, leaders are also the one who can also sensitize or make sure that these women are integrated into their communities, that they are coming back to providing support, acceptance for these women that will also help them to reintegrate better into their communities. Over.
Thank you. And I'll now turn to Ms. Meche for my last question, because you mentioned, the lack of policy framework on trafficking, and we had a question on efforts at regional level, whether there were sufficient efforts to coordinate, on this technical aspect within your region to exchange good practices, or if you thought that was something that was maybe a bit missing at the moment.
Regarding the legal framework, I would like to emphasize that there are gaps, especially for the protection of victims, not in penal aspects. So this is regarding the regional cooperation. Of course, there are many efforts done through the years, especially in cooperation with neighboring countries and with countries of destination for victims of trafficking through the cooperation agreements between governments, but even through efforts in establishing the unified SOP, especially between 4 countries in the region for the supporting return and reintegration of the victims of trafficking. And we have in Albania a national referral mechanism for the protection of victims of trafficking, and which support all the efforts for the protection and reintegration of victims of trafficking. And it's a cooperation framework between civil society and governmental institutions. I don't know if time is...
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much. And thank you to our 4 panelists. Thank you for everyone for joining. Apologies, we didn't have the time to address all of the questions today, but do not hesitate to email us to follow up on this conversation, and we can also refer you to our panelists. I would also like to thank my colleague Lisa Dixon for all the support in organizing this event. The recording of this webinar will be available on the event website tomorrow, as well on the Migration Hub. And as for reporter, you can contact my colleague Michelle Middelstadt with any question. Thank you all.